A top 10 matchup in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. It's number 7 Auburn and number 4 Georgia in our game of the week right here on the Gridiron Expert. Yeah. Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, breaking down the biggest game of Week 5 as number 7 Auburn travels to Athens to take on the 4th-ranked Georgia Bulldogs. It is just the second game of the season for both of these teams. Just the second week of SEC play for these teams, and yet we already have a top 10 matchup, one where the winner is going to get a significant resume-boosting win, and the loser is going to have their playoff hopes put in jeopardy. Going into this game, Georgia is a 6.5-point favorite. And of course, guys, that spread is brought to you by betnow.eu. Go ahead and take a look down in the description below for the link to BetNow. You can use our promo code GRIDIRON over there for a 100% sign-up bonus. It is the best place to place your bets, whether it is for college football, NFL, MLB, NBA Finals, of course, starting up today. So between the Miami Heat and the LA Lakers. So whatever your sport is, whatever your betting needs are, BetNow is the place for you. These are where we get all of our spreads from for our expert picks. Those are where we've gotten our spreads from all of last year, and we have been very successful using their site. I've enjoyed working with the guys over at BetNow for over a year now. So make sure to check that out down in the description below. Sign up today. I can promise you, you're not going to regret it. So we take a look at this Auburn-Georgia game, guys. One of the better and, to me, more underrated rivalries in the SEC, maybe in the nation as well. A game where Georgia is favored by less than a touchdown here. The Bulldogs have won 3 straight over the Tigers, and that includes a 21-14 victory last year on the Plains at Jordan-Hare Stadium. It should also be noted that, yeah, they've won 3 straight, but they've also won 6 of the past 7 against Auburn. So the Bulldogs have really dominated this series for the majority of the past decade. And when you look at these two teams and how they fared in Week 1, both had their highs and both certainly had their lows. And by Week 1, of course, I mean their first game last week against SEC opponents. Georgia overcame a very, very slow start on the road against Arkansas. The Bulldogs trailed 7-5 at halftime, trailed 10-5 in the third quarter before really hitting the light switch. They realized it was time to play football. They realized if they don't change something, they're going to lose to Arkansas. They put their foot on the gas. The defense played like the defense we expected them to be, and the Bulldogs scored 32 straight points to win 37-10. Auburn, on the other hand, I would say they had a more difficult opponent in Week 1, facing off against what was then number 23 Kentucky at home and defeating the Wildcats 29-13. Their defense, to me, for Auburn, really stepped it up in that game. The biggest storyline going in that game for me was, yes, Auburn, new offensive coordinator Chad Morris. How will Bo Nix play in Week 2? But for me, it was with all those losses up front, especially on the defensive line for Auburn, how are they going to be able to stop Cavassier Smoke and Asim Rose and Terry Wilson, now back for the Wildcats? How are they going to be able to stop that? And I would say they did a fantastic job doing so. We'll touch on their defense in a second, but they played well on that side of the ball, and Bo Nix ended up throwing for 3 touchdowns and over 200 yards to lead the Tigers to a huge SEC victory. So both are coming off, I would say, respectable and somewhat impressive victories to kick off SEC play. All things considered, considering they didn't have much time to practice, they started later than normal, they didn't have cupcake opponents necessarily to kick off the season, Georgia and Auburn played well for their first games of 2020. Let's take a look at the offenses here. That's obviously my favorite side of the ball. I'm a big offensive-minded guy. And I want to start here with Georgia because the big storyline going into this game is that JT Daniels has been cleared to play. JT Daniels, the transfer quarterback from USC, has been cleared to play and will, at least should, be starting on Saturday night against the Tigers. I think Kirby Smart would shock the entire nation if he decided to ride Stetson Bennett against Auburn. Now, Bennett did throw for 211 yards and 2 touchdowns in that win over Arkansas. But obviously, Daniels is the better option here. That was one of the biggest offseason moves in all of 2020. The major question is, that's great. He's going to be in at quarterback. The bigger question is he hasn't played football in over a year now. Got injured in that Week 1 victory over Fresno State during his time at USC. Tore his ACL, missed the rest of 2019, has not played a down of football since then. So how rusty is he going to look? And how well has he built chemistry with a Georgia wide receiver core that really isn't all that special outside of George Pickens and maybe Demetrius Robertson as well? So some major questions across the board for Georgia on the offensive side of the ball. We saw them struggle early in that game against Arkansas. Can they find a little bit of life, a little bit of spark now that Daniels is going to be under center and now that they're in their second game with Todd Monken as their offensive coordinator? So that is the big storyline going into Saturday night's game. Of course, the site of College Game Day, we should add. Auburn, on the other hand, believe it or not, I might give the offensive edge to the Tigers. We know their offensive line, when we talked about their game against Kentucky, we knew the offensive line was going to be an area of concern, and to me they exceeded expectations, only allowing 1 sack in that game against the Wildcats. Georgia's defense, of course, is going to be a different breed, and we'll touch on them in a little bit. But Bo Nix played well last week, 233 yards, 3 touchdowns against Kentucky. You look at that as well as what he did last year against Georgia. Georgia, very solid defense in 2019, and Bo Nix, as a true freshman, had 245 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and another touchdown on the ground. So Bo Nix, to me, I thought, in that first game, this last week, with Chad Morris as his new offensive coordinator, really seemed to take a major step forward. Kentucky had a very solid defense. They were the second-ranked passing defense in the country last year, and Bo Nix came out there and torched them. Can he do it again against what is arguably a better defense in Georgia? Can he do it again, and can someone take the load off of Bo Nix because he threw the ball 50 times last year against Georgia, and now their running game is practically non-existent? So the key in this game offensively for Auburn and for Georgia is what we just said, finding a run game. And that goes for both teams here. In recent years under Kirby Smart, Georgia has been very, very dominant on the ground. We've seen that. Georgia historically has been very, very dominant on the run. You got Nick Chubb, you got Sony Michel, you have Todd Gurley, you just had DeAndre Swift, and now you've got a great running back in Zamir White. But they've got to find a way to do better. Zamir White only had 71 rushing yards last week against Arkansas. They had 121 rushing yards on the day, but only averaged 2.9 yards per carry. Believe it or not, this may sound crazy, Auburn's got a better defense than Arkansas. Auburn has a better defense than Arkansas, and if Georgia was averaging less than 3 yards per carry, I don't know what's going to happen here on Saturday night unless the Bulldogs have made some improvement, because in a game here with JT Daniels that could be rusty up front, maybe doesn't have as much chemistry as some other quarterbacks, they're going to need someone to take the load off them. Zamir White's going to be that man. So Georgia has to establish a run game. Auburn has to be the same way. The Tigers just had 91 rushing yards against Kentucky last week. Their leading rusher was their quarterback in Bo Nix, who put up just 34 rushing yards. So Sean Shivers, DJ Williams, someone in that Auburn backfield has got to step up and try to find some sort of success on the ground, even if it's out of the passing game, even if it's little dump passes, screen passes to your running backs. Something's got to give here for the Auburn running backs to take the load off of Bo Nix, make life easier for Bo Nix against what's going to be such a good and very difficult Georgia defense to go up against. So let's talk about that defense. Let's certainly talk about that defense. I would say certainly a strength for both teams. Even though Auburn did allow a lot of yards to Kentucky, I would still say they are going to be a strength here and will give this Georgia offense a very difficult test. Keep in mind, Georgia's offense, I know they didn't have Daniels. I know it was the first game of the year, but they were held to 5 points. Really, 2 points. Those 2 points came off a safety, so it was 3 points, really, they were held to for the majority of the game, all the way through midway through the third quarter before their offense and defense really came to life. This Georgia defense, we've said it before, we'll say it again, they're the best in the country. That's plain and simple. And I don't think there's any disputing that. I know it's only been one game. I know we've seen other teams across the country play as well, and some that we haven't seen. But if you were to ask me right now, put me on the spot, who's the best defense in the country, it's going to be the Georgia Bulldogs. They are stacked at every position group. Defensive line, linebacking core, and your defensive backs. They forced 3 turnovers against Arkansas last week, all of them being interceptions, one of which was returned for a touchdown, so a pick 6 there. They held Arkansas and a very, very good and underrated running back in Rakeem Boyd to just 77 rushing yards on the day. They didn't really pressure Felipe Franks that much. The pass rush wasn't necessarily great. Felipe Franks didn't have all the time in the pocket, but they didn't get too many sacks on him. But he couldn't do everything by himself since they balled up Rakeem Boyd. So Georgia's defense really kind of came to life in that second half. Monty Rice leading the way at linebacker, Richard LeCount as well leading the way in that secondary, one of the best defensive backs in the country. Auburn, on the other hand, we mentioned they allowed a lot of yards to Kentucky, 384 if you want to be exact. They allowed 384 yards to the Wildcats. That includes 145 yards on the ground. So that, to me, is encouraging if you are a Georgia fan, if you are Zamir White, looking to bounce back and really get back to the basics here, get back to what you're used to, and that is running the football. So Auburn, not too great on the ground, but keep in mind, Kentucky did have one of the best offensive lines in the country. Kentucky did have a very good pair of running backs. That was to be expected in the game against the Tigers. What Auburn did do, though, was they did force 3 turnovers as well. 2 of them were fumbles. One of them was an interception, and that interception should have been a pick 6. Interception should have been a pick 6, but it was called back very controversially for targeting. I don't know if I fully agreed with that call. I felt like it was a makeup call for the Wildcats, but nonetheless, they still got the interception and prevented Kentucky from getting that touchdown at the end of the first half. We know that Kevin Steele is one of the best, if not the best, defensive mind in the SEC. There's a reason he is one of the top paid defensive coordinators in the conference. Kevin Steele is going to have a plan in this game. And you know it's going to be utilizing KJ Britt, who had 11 tackles last week against the Wildcats, one of the best linebackers in the SEC. And you know that they're going to do their best to go in there and rattle JT Daniels. So I'm really excited to see this defensive battle here. And I'm really excited to watch the battle between the linebacking cores. KJ Britt versus Monty Rice. Who wins that battle? Who pressures the opposing quarterback the most? So looking at the keys on defense for both teams here. We'll start with Georgia. Naturally, we start with the home team. A key for Georgia on defense. Remember, their key on offense was establishing the run. Georgia's key is really pressuring Bo Nix. Kind of the opposite here. Establish the run offensively, prevent the pass defensively. Because I don't think Auburn has what it takes to win the game on the ground. Their running game last week was non-existent. Again, Sean Shivers and DJ Williams did not have anything that really impressed me and surprised me, and I can guarantee you that Bo Nix is not going to be able to win this game for Auburn by being the leading rusher for Auburn, because Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs are not going to allow that to happen. So Georgia has to pressure Bo Nix. Get to Bo Nix. Make him uncomfortable. And that was a similar key that we had last week for that Auburn-Kentucky analysis that we brought. And Kentucky, to me, didn't do a good job of doing that. So Georgia, a little bit better of a defense, I think has the potential to be able to do that. Because when you look at Bo Nix, guys, against Kentucky, he did it all himself. Bo Nix was the playmaker for Auburn. Last year against Georgia, the reason that score was so close, 21-14, the reason Auburn battled back in the fourth quarter and nearly came all the way back to force it to overtime was because of Bo Nix. The defense played well too, but the offense was because of Bo Nix. So Georgia has to find a way to shut him down because Auburn simply cannot win it on the ground. When you look at Auburn as well, Georgia needs to make Bo Nix take some shots. Out of the 3 touchdowns for Bo Nix against Kentucky, his longest was 21 yards. He threw 2 touchdowns to Seth Williams. He had a 4-yard touchdown, an 11-yard touchdown, a 21-yard touchdown. 2 of those went to Seth Williams, and if I'm being honest, I thought Seth Williams made a better play on those passes than Bo Nix did. Seth Williams went up and over those defenders to get those balls, to score those touchdowns. I wouldn't really say that was all in credit to Bo Nix. So make him take some deeper shots because I'm not too impressed and not too confident in Bo Nix's deep abilities and accuracy when going deep against a very dangerous Georgia secondary. Auburn, their key, very similar to Georgia. Get to the quarterback. Rattle JT Daniels. It's his first game back in over a year. And this is not the Pac-12 anymore. This is not the Pac-12 anymore. JT Daniels, you are in the SEC. And luckily for Daniels, he is at home. And I know home field advantage doesn't play a huge role this year anymore. I get that. They're not going to be sold out stadiums or anything like that. But I would much rather have my first start be at home in front of limited home fans than on the road against limited away fans and limited hostile fans. So JT Daniels does have that going for him. Auburn's got to try to get to him and get to him early. And I can guarantee you that Kevin Steele is going to come out there with that game plan, as we mentioned, send a lot of blitz packages Daniels' way to try to rattle him, force him into some bad throws, especially if he's not fully built that chemistry with that Georgia wide receiver core. So the keys for both teams here, very, very similar. Establish that run on offense and defensively, get to the quarterback and force him into some bad throws. Got a lot of questions on both sides of the ball and at both those position groups for these two teams. And I would say that on paper, these two teams match up very, very nicely. As some people have said, this is a fantastic opportunity for Gus Malzahn and the Tigers to storm into Athens and pull off the upset. But the problem is, we don't see that happening. We are picking Georgia to win this game at home between the hedges. I do think this is another low-scoring game. Last year, 21-14 in favor of the Dogs. I can see it being very similar to that. I would be very surprised if either team here scored more than 28 points. I do believe Auburn does own that offensive edge. I think right now continuity at quarterback goes in favor to the Tigers. I think your wide receiver core goes in favor to the Tigers. Got Seth Williams, got Anthony Schwartz, Eli Stove. I think that offensive edge, maybe outside of the offensive line, is in favor of Gus Malzahn, Chad Morris, and the Tigers. The defense certainly goes in favor to the Bulldogs. And in what I think is going to be a low-scoring game, one where you will see a handful of mistakes and turnovers, I like to lean towards the team with the better defense. And I think the Georgia defense makes just enough plays in this game to make up for what I do think is going to be a mediocre offensive performance from the Bulldogs as JT Daniels tries to get his feet wet with his new team and also get acclimated to SEC football. And Georgia gets the win at home, remains a top 4 team, keeps their playoff hopes alive, because if they were to fall here, they would have to run the table against the likes of Alabama and Florida and an up-and-coming Mississippi State team. But Georgia does get the win here. Auburn loses this game in heartbreaking fashion. Another close loss for them, just not quite ready to get over the hump and defeat Kirby Smart and the Dogs at their own house. So guys, thank you for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. Also, make sure to check out everything down in the description below. We mentioned betnow.eu. Mentioned that at the beginning of the video. Our expert picks just came out today. New slate of games, new spreads, new analysis for all those games. Make sure to place them over on BetNow and use our promo code GRIDIRON, as well as making sure to sign up for our newsletter, those expert picks, and our Patreon account as well. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.